Hi, everyone. Happy holidays and happy new year. Welcome to the Big Ten Show presented by the Believe Network. He is Nebraska Cornhuskers legend and former NFL defensive lineman Adam Carriker. I am Tom Hannifan from Believe State of State, a Penn State football podcast. I hope you are ready for a nice, lazy weekend on the couch watching the New Year's Six games, other bowl games involving the Big Ten, and of course, the college football playoff. Adam, I love this time of year because it's just a time to relax and enjoy the last of college football. It's melancholy, it's bittersweet, but it's wonderful.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. Now you know why I don't sing and I try to talk about football. Dude, so bowl season, ever since I was a kid, the NCAA tournament, okay, in basketball, and college football bowl season were always the two most exciting times a year to me. And so I've looked forward to it ever since I was a kid. I got to admit, bowl games do not mean what they used to, but I still find them very, very intriguing. So I'm excited to talk a little bowl game prediction show today.
Yeah, the Big Ten has already been active this bowl season, but coming up this weekend, a multitude of Big Ten teams in bowl games. So we'll start small, no disrespect, but we will work our way up to the college football playoff. Let's get started with Wisconsin versus LSU in the ReliaQuest Bowl. You and I had to look that one up to see what bowl game that used to be, and is now, I think it was the Outback Bowl. Is that what you told me?
I
Yeah,
believe so.
we're learning so much. This is Wisconsin versus LSU. LSU will be without Heisman Trophy winner Jaden Daniels at quarterback, so this will be a different look for Brian Kelly and company. But Wisconsin, also a lot of movement in the transfer portal, trying to bolster their roster for next season. Looking at this game on paper, I feel like this is LSU without a doubt, but anything can happen in these quote unquote new exhibition games.
Well, yeah, you got so many players gone, so many young players playing, new players, if you will. So Wisconsin 7-5, LSU 9-3. I just feel like it's a bad matchup, a rough matchup for Wisconsin, if you will. LSU is 9.5-point favorite. The over/under is 55 points. So you look at LSU; they won't have Heisman Trophy winner Jaden Daniels, and I do feel like he deserved to win that Heisman Trophy because without him, I do think it's a completely different LSU team because their defense is awful. The offense is great, but that revolves around him. So I'm curious to see how this game does actually play out. Now, LSU's 3 losses against some pretty good teams: Alabama, Florida State, Ole Miss, all in New Year's Six bowl games, all top 10 football teams. So they had a pretty good schedule. Now, as far as the quarterback position for LSU, and I think this is going to kind of be the determining factor in the game, you've got sophomore quarterback Garrett Nusient, and or depending on who stands out in the bowl practices, you got freshman Ricky Collins. So I think that's going to be the determining factor, but I'm definitely going to take LSU right now.
Just more athletes altogether,
Yep.
especially on the offensive side of the ball. I think this is leaning heavily in LSU's favor. Feels like Wisconsin has got a lot of work cut out for them in the new Big Ten in 2024, because I think of the way that they've handled their program for years. They've been cost efficient, I think is the way I'll put it. And now with NIL being such a big factor, they run the risk of falling behind very quickly.
I think the other thing, and I've rooted for Wisconsin ever since I was a kid. I grew up watching Barry Alvarez, the Rose Bowls versus
Yeah.
UCLA. Would they play UCLA in a bowl game? I think they played them in the Sun Bowl one time, like 3 times in 5 years or something. So I grew up a Wisconsin fan. But I think, I don't think I know, they're built to win in the Big Ten. It's cold weather, it's defense, it's ground and pound. We're going to maximize the talent we get because it may not be as much as an Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, etc. But now you've got all these, I'm not going to call them all warm weather teams, but there's things that are changing and they're trying to throw the ball around a little bit more. So to their credit, maybe they looked ahead and saw that in the future, but we'll see what happens. I'm still rooting for Wisconsin. So that'll never go away from, except when they play Nebraska. I just wish Nebraska would beat them at some point. But the rest of the games, I'll root for Wisconsin.
Good times right now for Nebraska. Matt Rule has something cooking with Dylan Raiola coming on board. That was big news. Let's go to Iowa versus Tennessee in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. It's defense versus offense. And even still, Adam, it's like Tennessee's offense could have been under Joe Milton. It just was never realized. I think Milton's limitations were shown very early on this season, and it was a big step down from Hendon Hooker, unfortunately. And Iowa offensively, I don't know what they're going to put on the field in this game, but at least defensively, we know they'll put up a fight. How do you feel about this matchup?
Iowa 10-2, number 20 in the country. Tennessee 8-4, number 25 in the country. First team to get to 2 points wins. That's my prediction. Okay. And here's why I say that, because Tennessee, you mentioned they didn't quite have the offensive firepower that they were hoping for that they did a year ago, but they still had a good offense. But the two best defenses they faced this year, Missouri, they scored 7 points, and Georgia, they scored 10 points. So when they faced a really good defense, they struggled. Now, Iowa's defense is really good, but conversely, the best offense they faced this year was a Michigan offense that's in the 60th in the country, in the 60s in the country when it comes to total offense. Now, Iowa could have easily been 11-1 had that bad call not happen on their punt return for a touchdown versus Minnesota. So you could have 8-4 versus 11-1. Brian Ferentz's last game. All that being said, I'm taking Tennessee because, again, athletes, and I have no idea how Iowa is going to score.
Yeah, Iowa, that one you mentioned, 31-0 loss to my Nittany Lions. So I enjoyed that one. That was
Enjoyed
fun.
that one a lot, huh? Yep.
People don't forget. People don't forget.
I like it.
Best of luck to the Hawkeyes. Maryland versus Auburn in the TransPerfect Music City Bowl. Okay, we talk about opt-outs this time of year. What do you think about opting out of a bowl game?
Okay, so wow, you just opened up. I got all sorts of thoughts. I'm going to try to condense it because we could do a whole show on this.
Yes, we could.
The first player to ever do it was Christian McCaffrey. I know the McCaffrey family. I know Luke. I know the dad that he coached at Valor down in Denver, not far from where my family resides, Valor High School. Oh man, I hated it when I heard that. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is so disrespectful to bowl games. And then it was just a domino after that. Now, my thoughts since then are this: it's killing the bowl games. Okay, eventually there's going to be a team. Florida State thought about doing in this year. There's going to be a team that just opts out of a bowl game entirely. And actually, Nebraska did it a few years ago. They just weren't very good, and nobody in the country cared. At the time, somebody's going to do it, and the bowl games are just going to die, and then the playoffs going to go to 16, 24 teams, whatever the case may be. Eventually, there's just too much money to be made. Okay, now it's just not in me to opt out of something, okay, or to not show up. I came back and played my senior season, and I don't think I got drafted any higher than I otherwise would have, but I wanted to come back and play for my favorite school growing up, which was Nebraska. I know it's a little bit of apples to oranges, but it's all still fruit. My point is this, okay? I don't even blame the players, though. I blame a system where they're not held accountable because they're not honoring their full contract. But yet there's no fine, there's no repercussions, there's no reason to do it. Why in the world would I want to go practice for a month, play in an exhibition game, and potentially get hurt and cost myself millions of dollars? I blame the fact that college football doesn't have a better system set up to hold them accountable, so they have to actually honor their contracts fully.
The reason I bring up that topic is because I think this game is curious for one reason, as the outsider, not necessarily a diehard Maryland or Auburn fan. Maryland starting quarterback Taulia Tagovailoa has opted out of this game as he is out of eligibility and he's going into the NFL draft. My first thought is, what are you thinking? There are players who opt out where I completely understand it. Penn State's defensive end, Chop Robinson, opted out of the Peach Bowl, declared for the NFL draft. He will probably be one of the top 5, top 10 pass rushers, edge rushers taken this year. So he's protecting that investment. Taulia Tagovailoa is not his brother. Taulia Tagovailoa is an emotional, inconsistent quarterback who's been in college for 6 years and never lived up to the potential that so many people saw in him. Every single year, Adam, I feel like we look at the slate of quarterbacks in the Big Ten and people are like, Taulia could break out this year, and he never did. So for me, as a reporter, fan of of college football, I look at this and I'm like, why wouldn't you play? You have more to gain by playing Taulia.
This was his chance to help his stock versus a known program, okay, a program with a brand and an SEC team. If he goes out and has a bad game, it probably doesn't hurt him. I guess the risk of injury is probably why he's doing it, but it makes a lot of sense. What you're saying makes a lot of sense. So I would have recommended to him specifically to play in the game. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. As far as the game itself, man, this is interesting because I wonder. Auburn could have easily been 8-4. All you have to do is not give up, what was it, a 31-yard touchdown pass on 4th and to the moon to Bama, and you're 7-5. And first of all, they're probably in a bigger bowl game, no disrespect, but the spread gets wider. Don't lose by 3 touchdowns at home to New Mexico State, and this spread is wider. I mean, Auburn is just one of these teams that's so, I don't know what to expect out of them. I'm going to go with them because Maryland, let me see here. They started 5-0. Okay, then they lost 4 in a row, and they never looked the same again the rest of the year. They ended up the season 7-5. Auburn 6-6. Could have been 8-4. I'm going to go with Auburn because without Tagovailoa, Maryland, I mean, they were the top passing offense in the Big Ten in early November. Okay, they didn't finish that way, but without him, they're going to struggle a lot. And Auburn's just got more athletes everywhere. Although I don't know what to expect out of Auburn, I'm still going to go with them.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I think Auburn trending in the right direction despite that last second loss to Alabama. Hugh Freeze, I think, is building something at Auburn. Is it going to be huge? I have no idea. Shifting to some bigger New Year's Six bowls, Ohio State versus Mizzou in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic. Mizzou was on a tear this year. You were just talking about how good their defense played. Cody Schrader leading the SEC in rushing yards. And Ohio State, you asked me a week or two ago about how I was feeling about them. Like, I still don't know who's going to play quarterback in this game. We expect Devin Brown, but still just doesn't feel that cozy with the quarterback position at Ohio State, which is fascinating because when was the last time we said that?
Oh, it's always a loaded room with, like 2, 3, 4, 5-star guys. You have Joe Burrow who transfers and leaves because he can't get on the field. That's how much talent they typically have. I'm curious, not to take a random sidebar, but what are they going to do? Devin Brown, this is his opportunity. I'm just going to be honest. He's either going to win or lose the starting job in this game.
Mm-hmm.
What he does is you've got spring ball, you've got all fall camp. Let's be real. Everybody's watching this game as a Buckeyes fan. They don't care about the game. They don't, which is why I'm going to pick Missouri, even though I think Ohio State's a better team. But they've had, as last time I looked, they had 16 players in the transfer portal, which was 10th most in the country. So Ryan Day's dealing with that. This is Devin Brown's opportunity. Let's say Devin doesn't play well. Then what does Ohio State do? Okay, you're not going to go get a top-rated quarterback out of high school at this point. You wouldn't count him to start anyways. Transfer portal, the highest-rated player out there is the quarterback who played at Arkansas last year, and he was, I believe, because I looked at this last night, he was, I believe, the 13th rated quarterback in the transfer portal,
KJ
which isn't
Jefferson,
exactly, no disrespect. He's a really good passer, not great, really good runner, not great passer. It's kind of the opposite of Kyle McCord, but I think there'd be a lot of Kyle McCord type question marks with the Ohio State fan base just for different reasons if he were to go there, and that's the best option there is. So Devin has to play well. I think this is actually a big bowl game for Ryan Day because he needs Devin to take control of that starting job. Otherwise, I don't know what they do.
I'm with you. And then what was the statistic that you and I were talking about off air? About 40% of Big Ten players in the transfer portal, or 40% of the players in the transfer portal came from Big Ten schools. Do I have that right?
Yeah, so the top three teams with the most amount of transfers. And last time I looked again, okay, this is fluid. Indiana, Michigan, Indiana, Michigan State, and Purdue. We're tied for the most in the country, all Big Ten teams. Then you had Cincinnati, Arkansas, NC State, and Vanderbilt were tied next. Georgia and Florida tied next. And then Ohio State was at number 10. So that is 40% of the teams with the most transfers belong to Big Ten teams.
There's a lot of movement. A lot of movement.
It is.
Let's talk.
Nebraska only has 3, by the way, at this moment in time in the transfer portal. Just saying. Just throwing that out there.
Cornhuskers are looking exciting for 2024. I don't know if they're going to go, completely berserk next year, win the Big Ten or something like that. But I think you'll see a winning record. I think you'll see improvement under Matt Rule.
Well, so to that point, 4 quarterbacks. Okay, we're in that quarterback room. Chubba Purdy, Heinrich Harburg, Dylan Raiola, Daniel Kalen. 2 of those guys are true freshmen. You can't really count on them. Love Heinrich Harburg. But of the 4, he's probably the least quarterback skill set given, okay? Trying to be nice. And then Chubba Purdy, whose brother obviously plays for the Niners, does pretty good, probably would have been the early favorite to be the starter next year, transferred. So now you got 2 true freshmen and a guy who was talking about moving positions. So what does Nebraska do? At the time that we're recording this anyways, that's an interesting question. So
my hope is it's not a DJ Uiagalelei situation where he gets thrust in there too early. Dylan Raiola, that is. Other bowl games this weekend, I will try to be unbiased with this. Penn State versus Ole Miss in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Again, this feels similar to the conversation we had about Iowa, Tennessee, is that it's great defense versus a great offense. Penn State's defense, one of the top 3 in the country. Ole Miss will have Jackson Dart, should have Quinshon Judkins, fantastic running back. So you have the selling point of this game, as I've talked about with Justin King on State of State, is that you expect to have both starting quarterbacks. You expect to have the starting running backs at play. There's not a lot of bowl games that can say that. And that's the weird thing now about bowl season. It's like, well, why am I tuning in? I was like, because at least the positions you're going to be paying attention to will be filled by regular starters.
So this is, for that reason, one of the bowl games I'm looking forward to the most. Okay. I wish, and remind me, Chop Robinson, okay? I wish he was playing. I understand why. This was also one of the toughest bowl games for me to pick, But when you lose one of the top 4 or 5 edge rushers that's coming out in the draft, that's swayed it towards Ole Miss for me when I probably was leaning Penn State otherwise. What do you think?
I think for one game, missing one of 10 is not huge. Now, that's no disrespect to Chop Robinson, but being able to cycle in Adisa Isaac, being able to cycle in Denai Dennis Sutton, Amin Vanover, provided all these guys are healthy going into this game, who knows what could happen? Slip on a banana peel on the way to the airport, something like that. So hopefully everybody's good to go. But I think for one game, it should be okay. Penn State has not had too many opt-outs. It's a question for me is that offense and defense for Penn State, both sides have coordinators for this game. 4 guys, 2 sides of the ball. That could be a challenge. And then it's also an opportunity for Drew Aller and company to show that they can put together a competent offensive game plan going into 2024 with a new offensive coordinator coming in. But James Franklin and Lane Kiffin, never without headlines, man. That's the good thing.
Who you going with? Who's your pick?
I'm biased. I think I'm going with Penn State. I like the defense to outdo Ole Miss's offense. So.
Dude, I want to pick Penn State so bad, and I'm not even going to hide my Big Ten bias. But like I said, I'm picking Ole Miss. But you brought up another thing I forgot to mention: the coordinator situation. You've got the co-coordinator situation. You've got Penn State, whose offensive coordinator was fired, and on the other side, and I'm not saying Lane Kiffin is some mastermind guru, but this is a guy who's called offensive plays in the NFL for national championship team. And I think and that's kind of where I was going with the Chop Robinson thing. I think it gives them a little bit of an edge. Did you give a pick for Missouri, Ohio State? I basically
I'm
think
going
Ohio
with
State.
Mizzou as well.
Are
In
you?
that. Yeah,
Okay.
forgive me. I
Yeah.
think Mizzou just has more to play for. And to the
Yes.
point you made, Ohio State's just kind of some air's been let out of the tire.
Yeah. I think Ohio State's the better team, but this isn't the Ohio State team that we know. They probably don't even want to be there. I'm only excited to see what the quarterback does, and I think Missouri actually wants to be there, and I think they're running pretty much full tilt.
They have more to play for. They're trying to make
Mhm.
a statement. The last Big Ten bowl game, Michigan versus Alabama in the Rose Bowl in the college football playoff semifinal. The other semifinal game is, of course, Washington versus Texas in the college football playoff. So you and I have talked about this in recent weeks, but now that we're on the brink of these games, the college football playoff, the last year that we'll see 4 teams in the college football playoff, are you happy to see this format come to an end, or did you kind of like it?
Dude, once again, that's a whole I have so many. I'm very opinionated, Tom. Okay,
You're
I'm
in the
gonna
right
condense
show.
dude, I'm gonna condense my answer, and I'm going to say that when we had the 4-team playoff format announced, I was excited, but all it's done is it's basically the most deserving teams, not necessarily the best, and that's never been clearly defined, which is the only reason that it kind of bothers me. We need definition. And then it's kind of created this vacuum towards the top, and it's all about these 2 games. It used to be there was a national title game, but you had the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, and everything else. Now it's been all about these 2 games. I'm just going to say it's destroyed so many other things about college football. So no, I'm glad it's gone because I'm hoping it makes more games desirable to watch. I'm hoping there's more reason for more teams to play at the end of the year because college football has never been more profitable, but it's never been more tough to watch for me, in my opinion, especially when you get to this time of the year, especially compared to how it used to be. That's my short, condensed answer. Okay, so you got Michigan, Bama, the 2 most winningest programs in the history of college football. My initial thought was Bama looked not very good, not very Bama-esque early on this year. Double-digit loss at home, okay, to Texas, and then struggled on the road at UCF. Even at the end of the year, needed that miracle pass versus Auburn. They made the play. Auburn didn't. Give them credit. Jalen Melrose, the most improved player in America. They have the number 1 strength of schedule in America, where Michigan, what Rob Stone say last week, had a manageable schedule, easy,
Yeah,
soft as tapioca
light,
pudding schedule.
soft. Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'm like, man, they got a scrambling quarterback. Michigan hasn't seen one. And then in the last 4 games, 3 of the last 4 games, they didn't even reach 300 yards of total offense. Part of that's because they didn't have to. They just said, we're going to Michigan you. In other words, we're not going to, no disrespect to Penn State, we're not
I
even going to
remember
pass
that
the
game.
ball.
Thank you.
We're not even going
Thanks
to
for
pass
bringing
the
that
ball.
up.
So that speeds up the sorry. That speeds up the clock. So different factors go into that. I'm still going to go with Michigan. I think they're the better team. Okay, but it's going to be a lot closer than I would have thought it would have been when I first would have thought about this matchup a month ago. What do you think?
I just like the way Alabama is trending. And I know you and I have spoken about this in the last few weeks, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Jalen Milroe is a problem, is a
Mhm.
real problem. And people talk about, oh, well, JJ McCarthy can extend plays and he gives Michigan options. Jalen Milroe is the next level of that concept. And I think what Nick Saban and company are able to do with time to prepare for an opponent is dangerous. It's why I think you saw Michigan be a little bit nervous when they didn't draw Florida State and they drew Alabama in the playoff. So I'm leaning towards Alabama in this game in particular. I know you and I have discussed that before. We've discussed the other game, Washington and Texas, briefly. I believe you picked Washington the last time out, correct?
Yeah, just to put a button on Michigan Bama from my point of view, I think Jalen Melrose is the wild card, but I think you brought up J.J. McCarthy. He's going to be, I don't want to put it all on one guy, but he's going to be the biggest difference maker because he doesn't have to make plays. He's going to have to. Can he do what he did versus Ohio State? And even TCU, it was Michigan's defense that lost that game last year.
Very good point.
Can he do that against a much better team? Also, Harbaugh, bad bowl record. Saban, great bowl record. Washington, Texas, I will readily admit, Texas has better trenches, offensive, defensive line. Texas looks like a national championship team. They have the much higher recruited players. They have athletes all over the field. And I'm still going to go with Washington simply because one of the top quarterbacks in the country, 3 NFL wide receivers, maybe the best outside of Marvin Harrison Jr., best wide receiver in the country versus a pass defense that struggles. Now Texas got a lot of leads. Teams had to throw. Maybe that softens up those stats. I just think it's a matchup that helps Washington. I'm still going to go with Washington.
I'm still going with Texas because I'm going to be stubborn. So, and it's not to be just a straight up contrarian, but I think Alabama and Texas, the firepower Texas has, I don't know if Washington will be able to keep up with it. Could see a shootout in that game. And honestly, I hope we do. I just don't want to see any blowouts.
Yes.
I'm sick of the college football playoff semifinal blowouts and the national title blowouts. Like, just give me a competitive game. That's all I ask.
Yeah. That's what I was kind of talking about. Like, the 4 most deserving may not always be the 4 best, but that's why we've had so many blowouts in the past. I almost, to put up just a simple answer, I wish it was an 18 playoff. That's what I wish. Because then you get the 4 most deserving. You can always have the 4 best, and then you're going to have better games, at least in that first round.
I will fly out to Colorado at some point and we'll record a 2-hour podcast where we just flesh out all this stuff in person.
Dude, it'd go by so fast. I know we're pressed for time, but I've got to ask you one question.
Go for it.
All right. You were an announcer for WWE. Mm-hmm. All right. Vince McMahon is an icon. Mm-hmm. Okay. If he ever decided to just start telling stories, oh my God, it would be crazy. But since he hasn't decided to do that, I have a question about you and Vince McMahon in your ear while you're trying to call Monday Night Raw, because I have heard that he can be quite interesting, demanding, vulgar, whatever the case may be, while you're trying to call Monday Night Raw a live national television. What is that like with him directly in your ear on Raw?
Interesting is a good way to put it. It's challenging. You're a human being. If you're ever trying to have a conversation with one person and then another person is speaking in your ear, maybe a lot of you experienced that over the holidays this past weekend. It's tough to keep focus. And I've had that happen to me in on cameras where you really have to be focused and paying attention. I'll say this. There's also a technology element because he's in the back and there is a big switchboard of all the different people from production, the cameramen, the audio guys, the backstage crew, to the announcers, the individual announcers, all calling the announcers. Inevitably, human error comes into play. And there have been times where I have been cued and he wasn't intending to speak to me and he's speaking to somebody else about something completely different. And you're just getting dialogue in your ear that has nothing to do with it, but you're paying attention because it's Vince McMahon. And you're just like, well, we'll see where this goes. I'll get through it. And then you get a, sorry, pal. And he clicks off. Anything can happen.
He says that a lot, pal. That's like his word, isn't it?
That was my experience for quite some time. Hey, check out TNA Wrestling on January 13th, Hard to Kill, and check out the TNA Plus app. You haven't seen anything until you've seen everything. He's Adam Carriker. I'm Tom Hannifan. Happy holidays and Happy New Year. Enjoy the New Year's 6 games and enjoy the college football playoff.